you're taking some time out of your very busy day to spend with us, to learn some things about hybrid workplace. I'm going to ask my counterpart, David de Trinidad, to introduce himself.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everybody. My name is David de Trinidad. I'm the Vice President of the Pac Northwest here for Solutionz. And I, too, wanted to thank you all for taking the time to join us today for what we feel is a very poignant topic, right? A topic that everybody is dealing with today. So with that, I'd like to introduce our special guest, Rob Swan. He's the Channel Marketing Manager for the Americas with Neat. Rob?
Great. Thank you, David. Should we just get started right away? Anything else before any housekeeping items? We're good. Anything about questions? Can people submit questions?
I think so. Yeah. Why don't we just say, if you have questions, why don't you pop them into the chat?
Great.
And we'll try to stay on top of them. And if not, we'll get back to you personally with the answers. Good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds great. All right. So we'll get started here. So we'll start from a place of kind of general understanding, like so this is remote work. So I want to delineate between a few terms because a lot of times people mix up in the media remote work versus hybrid work versus work from home. Remote work, to be clear, is just anytime you're not working from an office. So it could be working from home, it could be working from a coffee shop, it could be working on the road, etc. Working from home is pretty clear. You're in your home office. And then hybrid is actually a mix of remote work and hybrid work. So you're in the office a certain number of days, you're at home or working remotely a certain number of days. So these are things we probably know. So we'll start from that place, and then we'll kind of work up the chain of mystery and try to tell you some things that maybe we think you don't know. So some of the benefits of remote work that we've learned, increased flexibility is clear, cost savings. So there was a report that said 100% remote workers save companies $11,000 a year on average. There's increased employee satisfaction, more time for family and friends, et cetera. It's easier to connect with people in business, no matter where they are, right? We've learned that. Oh, the other thing we should mention is there's an attrition at the bottom of every slide. So you can see where this data is coming from. This isn't Solutionz and Neat doing a bunch of surveys. This is actually expert sources, places like McKinsey, Harvard Business Review, Stanford, and those type of agencies. So these are the benefits, and
I think if I can interject real quick, Rob, I think a couple things that aren't listed on here that are really obvious benefits of a remote working environment also are increased productivity. Here the slide here talks about the flexibility and the cost savings and whatnot, but the productivity itself can increase when you have a model like this. Also carbon footprint, that's kind of big now as well. How can this affect the carbon footprint out there? So a couple extra points in there.
Very true. Okay, so then some of the drawbacks that we've learned. So there's a decrease in workforce culture. It's a little harder to sort of maintain that, right? When people are remote, feelings of isolation, working more hours. We probably all kind of experience that. It's easier to connect on business, but it is harder to connect socially, really, with your coworkers. So you might feel a little less connected with your company strategy as well. So we're going to go from remote work to now hybrid. So this is what we've learned about hybrid. So to be clear, 55% of the people don't have the ability to actually work remotely at all. So these would be your frontline retail workers, people that work in security, the guy making your sandwich, people at the hospital, et cetera. This rest of the people is what these statistics actually refer to. So 20% of people actually never want to work from home. I was surprised to actually learn that a large congregation of this group is younger singles, new grads, because I figured they would be very comfortable with the technology. But what the data shows is that these folks realize they're the ones that need to be mentored. They need to be in an office. And a lot of times they live, with 4 roommates. They don't have their own space. Like they don't want to do, work from home from their bedroom, or they might live at home still, right? So they just don't have like a bigger space to actually do that. And then empty nesters actually comprises a big chunk of that group too. Then there's 30% of people that actually never want to work from an office, right? Statistically, these are people a lot of times in their 30s and 40s. They've got kids 12 and under. They might be taking care of an elderly parent. They've got pets. They probably have a nice house living out in the suburbs somewhere with a really nice office. So you can see, maybe kind of understand why they might be a little more reluctant to go into an office or want to. And then the rest of the folks are comprised in this other group, which they actually do prefer a hybrid model. So they would like to be in an office somewhere between 1 and 4 days and still have sort of the flexibility to work remotely on a day or two a week. So we're moving into what we now consider well-kept secrets about hybrid. So workers have demonstrated over the last few years what economists call a revealed preference for hybrid. A revealed preference is that is an economic term. It's a little different than a stated preference, something you might just hear on a survey. The data that we are presenting here, for the most part, is random control trials and different things like that, where you're actually seeing this data being played out and then being reported by people at universities. So one thing that they found out is that quit rates are 35% less for people with the ability to work both from an office and at home, given that flexibility. They also equate that ability to an 8% increase in pay. And that skews higher for technology, where it's 11% and it's 10% for finance. So people see that as a really important perk, right? Then, more than 50% of people, if their hybrid option were removed from their job, they would start looking for a new job tomorrow. So the last point is one that I actually thought, this is the one that surprised me a little. Hybrid workers are 5% more productive than their 100% in office colleagues. And I actually thought that one was worth diving into here. So, why is that the case? So to start, you save 72 minutes a day on average, is what the data shows. It's basically 60 minutes of commute time and 12 minutes of get ready time. So David and Michael have known me for years. They probably are surprised to see me without a baseball cap, because most of the time I just throw on a hat instead of combing my hair. But so I'm part of that 12 minutes. But it's really kind of a win-win, because the employer gets an extra 30 minutes worked per day for employees when they work from home, and the employee gets another 42 minutes. So they get, it's really kind of a win-win in that situation, right? And if you're measuring it against just a standard 40-hour work week, let's say someone works from home 2 days a week, that's an hour extra worked. So that's already a 2.5% uptick in productivity, right? In a 40 measured against a 40-hour work week. So then there's no time clock. So when you work from home, I mean, David, Michael, I want to know if this is true of you guys too. Do you start earlier? Do you work later? Do you work
Yes.
around the clock?
Yes.
Yes.
And that could be
Okay.
the downside too, right?
It is.
It's so easy to, in the middle of the night, something pops into your head and then you walk into the office and start working. Next thing you know, you've been in the office for 2 years or 2 years, 2 hours.
Feels like that sometimes.
Sometimes
You're
it feels
right.
like 2 years for 2
Yes.
hours. But yes, so absolutely, you do tend to work earlier. You tend to work later, all hours of the day. But it's
Mhm.
a plus, and it can be a negative if it's not managed correctly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And so, in the middle point, I'm sorry, Michael, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to say, once I'll jump onto the middle point because it's kind of
Yeah.
really relevant, right? And you'll show us the rest of the slide, I'm sure. But
Mhm.
so I've been with Solutionz for 2 years. Prior to Solutionz, I worked in the manufacturing side of the industry for 21 years, and I traveled for a living, very aggressively traveled for a living. In 2019, we all know what happened, right? We all decided we couldn't go anywhere because that decision was made for us, and boom, into our homes we go. And yes, I worked at home when I wasn't traveling on the road. But I learned a lot of things in being now confined to the house and working, and everything under that no time clock. And you indicated it earlier in one of the other slides that potentially people are actually working more, right? I am very concerned about work-life balance. I want those that work on my team. In the Southeast, I have 125 employees completely responsible to the organization up through me. I want them to have a great work-life balance. I'm really glad that Solutionz has a hybrid program. And David's going to talk a little bit about that a little bit more. But the real reality, in my opinion, is I'm thinking, and we're just all sort of joking about the fact that we're working more because we have this program. And I truly believe that we are working more. And so the real question is do we really have that work-life balance that potentially we're kidding ourselves into, right? The car ride home, although yes, it's 30 minutes for me to get home today, right? Because I go to an office every day now, right? It's 30 minutes where I can put my head into something else, usually AC/DC or Genesis or something like that. And so I thoroughly enjoy that time, right? But I have actually found that from 2019, where I was subjected to be working at home in 2020, to now when I get home, I'm a lot more cognizant about I'm home, my wife is home, we're going to spend some more time together, and that we're actually work less. That was not the case when all of a sudden I'm subject to being home all the time. So that's my 2 cents. I'm really more worried about, do we really have the work-life balance correct?
Yeah.
That's so much a part of management these days, right? Is ensuring their teams are also making their life balanced with work and home. So I'm going to just flesh out that middle point, work fuller shifts. I didn't understand that one because, okay, people in the office, but what the Guardian actually posted an article that showed research that you're in the office, you're actually interrupted every 11 minutes. And I remember those days. Like I don't work from an office now. I would like to a couple days, but there's not a neat one near. But in the old days, I do remember that people would, just because you're near, they would ask you any question that kind of came up, right? Or you might find yourself, someone retires and you're in the break room for 45 minutes eating cake unexpectedly. I mean, these are all things that sort of take you away from productivity. And then, taking fewer sick days, like you can work from home, right? Even if you're not feeling so well, and most people don't call in sick. But I think the most important thing is on this right-hand column here. So when you do your hybrid right, and when organizations do it right, the days sort of naturally fall into a pattern to where, let's say you're in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Those are going to be the natural days that your teammates are going to start scheduling brainstorming sessions, creative work, meetings, trainings, lunches in the office, mentoring activities, client meetings, those type of things. And then Monday and Friday in this case would be the days for your home or deep quiet work. And so doing your reading, preparing presentations, maybe doing expense report, a few one-on-one meetings, which you can never avoid completely. But what McKinsey shows is that by doing your quiet work in a quiet environment, you actually have a 3 to 4% productivity uplift per minute because you're just not interrupted as much, right? So your concentration is deeper, you can get better work done. And I actually just saw Microsoft release their work trend index, their annual one. They just released it on Tuesday. And one of their stats said that 68% of people say they no longer have time for their quiet work. So if offices do their hybrid right, you're actually structuring the days so that you can be more productive at home because you're doing the things that you should be doing at home as opposed to juggling everything, right?
If you flip to the next slide, Rob, I'll add a little
Yeah.
bit more to that. You could go to the next slide, but
Okay.
one of the things that we're working on here in Solutionz is better time management. We're even designing training around it, the whole 9 yards. With the salespeople that work in the Southeast for my team, time management is something we have a lot of conversation about, right? And to your point with those last couple of bullet points about use your work from home time to get the things that you need to get done that otherwise aren't going to get done potentially because of the interruptions, right? It's a perfect time management tool to say, I got to do my expenses. They're due on Fridays. I'm going to make my Friday work from home day to be my expenses day, get the PowerPoint, get myself queued up for the next work week. I think that work from home does allow that to actually be better for those people who have those tasks that they have to actually get done. So, all the time management training that's out there is all says the same thing, and that is you can't multitask, right? But you can better slot where you need to place the big tasks that need that uninterrupted time, and that is one of the bigger benefits of a work from home or work from office hybrid program. So, thank you.
No doubt.
And one thing I'll throw in there real quick is that, Solutionz, yes, we are an AV integration company. Yes, we sell the technology to be able to do all of this, but we struggled with this, right? Just like every other organization out there after COVID. I think, once COVID hit, as Michael mentioned in 2019, that really forced a lot of changes, a lot of wanted changes and some unwanted changes. And Solutionz found itself looking within, saying, "Gosh, everybody had to work from home for a while there, and now, do we all go back to the office? Do we not? What's the right thing to do?" And so, the management here really spent some time with this and really kind of mulling it over and thinking through it and whatnot. And what we ended up adopting was a work from where it makes sense policy, which is kind of a hybrid type policy. And it really kind of fits into what Michael's saying with, or what Rob was saying actually, where the bookends, right? So the Mondays and Fridays, you're potentially at home, and in the middle is where you have that interaction with different folks in the office. You have meetings, you have trainings, and things of that nature, and that tends to work out fairly well. I know later on there's a few other slides where we'll dive in a little deeper into that, but it certainly is something that we all struggled with, right? So.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And I saw a statistic, is not in this presentation, but over half the companies are still struggling with their policies when it comes to
Yes.
when you should be in the office, how many days, like when you can work from home. So that's why we thought this content was really so relevant. So, okay, going back to the slides here. So now we're into better kept secrets about hybrid work. You guys have had some anticipation here seeing this on screen so long without the answer, but all demographics, ages, and races, they all do prefer to have like a hybrid strategy so they can work from home and not have that flexibility. But there's a stronger preference among these particular groups. If you look at it, it kind of makes sense, right? People with kids, people with disabilities. Women, the preference isn't enormous, but it's like a 2.8 days preferred at home as opposed to 2.4 for men. So it's about half a day a week, which is notable. And then minorities, so this is one I really had never thought of, but statistically, what the data shows is that minorities live further away from city centers. So a lot of times they're further away from HQ. They take public transportation a little more often. So it could be just a little more challenging, right, to get into the office for certain groups of people. And the reason it's important to keep this in mind is because any organizations that mandate a more full return to office, so 5 days for sure, but even 4 days, like they probably almost positively will see a higher attrition rate within those particular groups. And add on top of that, there's something called a presenteeism bias that people that are in the office are promoted at a higher rate than people that work remotely. Negative 50% impact if you're fully remote. So I think organizations, you need to combat that just kind of by keeping these things in mind and making sure you're treating everyone fairly, whether they're in the office or not, when it comes to promotions. But by not keeping these things in mind, there is the potential to reverse a lot of the progress that's been made the last 20 years, destroy culture, and even possibly expose organizations to future lawsuits if they don't address these things, right?
Yeah, I think presenteeism it deserves kind of a little deeper dive. I think when somebody works remotely from home, you're able to see the outcome, the quality of the work, those types of tangible things. But it's the
For
intangible
sure.
that when you talk about being able to be promoted, things of that nature. Sometime as a management or as a manager, you want to look and see how somebody's interacting with somebody else on a day-to-day basis. Can they interact well with others, and those other kind of intangible things that you can only see when you're in an office, right? If I'm sitting in my home office and somebody else is sitting in their home office, what I'm looking for is that outcome at the end of the day. But it's all those other things in the middle that really impact as well. And I think that's why, at least for us, a flex type schedule, work from where it makes sense schedule, really lends itself to, because then you get the best of both worlds.
I'm so glad you said that. It's so true. And it's funny because, we talked about the productivity when you work from home. Um, some of the reasons that you're not productive in an office are the reasons that you get promoted, right? If your boss pulls you aside and wants to tell you about a certain project, well, you're not exactly doing the quote unquote work you're supposed to do in the daytime, but you might be learning about something that you're going to be a part of, or just like you said, interacting with other people, cross, department collaboration and that kind of thing. And actually that leads into this quote that's at the bottom here from Emma Harrington. Um, we find a now versus later trade-off associated versus remote work. So I think especially with your younger workers, like if you get people pushing back saying, I don't want to come to the office ever, there's clearly benefits like convenience benefits, especially, and flexibility benefits from working from home always, but it could impact your career in the long term, right?
Bingo.
So
Yeah, Rob, I mean, I was going to jump right in there. Look at that quote. I mean, I interpret that quote in a bit of a different way. What David said is 100% correct. I think that the way companies mitigate the bias of promotions and other things is to be able to have a thought leadership conversation with all of the employees. Employers, sit down, have a thought leadership conversation, make it part of your fireside chats or your town halls to say, this is how we're going to embrace this hybrid program. Here's how everybody can get something out of it, including office morale, being with people when you need to be with them, when you want to be with them, when you have programs and all that kind of stuff. For my own self, I did a little bit of math, and I'm thinking that I'm going to work 40 to 43 years for my entire working career. When I got into the working career, I had no idea that I'd ever work half time at home, right? I had no idea that there was going to be some sort of pandemic that would force every single one of us into our homes, right? And that all of a sudden, post-pandemic, there was this whole new concept of work. I couldn't have predicted that 100 years ago when I actually started working, right? So now where are we, right? Can we really predict that in 20 years from now, what will the work life look like? So my invitation to the employers is help especially your younger workforce, but help them understand what the future of their work and their contribution to the organization might look like, but also encourage them to at least participate some of the time. Because I think too that we have a sales intern working for us right now. We were talking about this yesterday, actually, and he said that most of his college buddies are introverts and will completely not survive in the work market the day they're going to actually have to be in the work market. So there's that whole idea of you do need to embrace some of it. You do need to be part of the culture. You do need to be seen. You do need to be heard. And that, to me, I'm almost to the end of my working career, right? But to me, it's, hey, how do I help my team set themselves up for success for the next 30 years that we're working? Let's unpack this just a little bit. Look at both sides of the fence, right? I think that's the responsible thing for an employer to do.
Yeah,
well said.
Another thing I'll jump in and say here is that this conversation about this particular slide really kind of takes me back to something that our CEO Bill Warnick always tells us, and that is, whenever there's a change coming, or whenever a new rule or a policy change, or whatever the case may be, whether people like it or not, or whatever that looks like, what he always says is, I'll always tell you the why behind it. The why is super critical, and he is so right. How do you get your folks to buy in, right? You got to tell them the why. Why do we need to go back to the office a few days a week? Why do we need to work from home a few days a week? Not just we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but here's the why behind it. And I think if you can include that into the conversation, you're going to have better outcomes.
Yep.
Great point. Great point. So that was all the scary bad news, the worst news. The really great news and the best kept secret really about doing hybrid right is that when you do it right, it actually is a huge profit center for your organization, and it gives you great competitive advantages, right?
Yeah, as you go to the next slide, you're absolutely right. But one of the things that we'll talk about in the next couple of slides is corporate America, whether it's an actual company, whether it's an educational element, a church, a school, whatever, but everybody's going to now be faced with the idea of right sizing the space, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. And that is, quite frankly, one of those profit centers. It's a huge profit center. Like I may not need, and I'll tell a story about what we did in our Atlanta office. I may not need the space I once had. So we'll get back to that one.
Looking forward to it. All right. So, so why is it a profit center when you do your hybrid, right? One, so we talked about that 5% increase in productivity. That does align directly with revenue. So even at, you're not, costs aren't going up. In some cases, they're being lowered. And, productivity aligning with revenue, your revenue is going up as well, right? That 8% increase in pay, how people sort of perceive the ability to work from home, that's just a critical perk. And the employment trend index goes up about 5 to 7 points a year. I've heard some economists say that you could literally give happy employees a 3% increase in pay and they'll stay, right? People are now sort of putting more focus on their own mental well-being, happiness above just paycheck. So I'm not telling you guys not to give your employees raises, but just a reality. What some organizations are doing actually, because there are some workers that could never work from home. So you got people maybe in the warehouse or shipping and delivering. They actually have given them more of a bonus actually at the end of the year because they don't have that ability. So just different ways to think about, right? Spreading the wealth. But clearly happier employees are more easily retained. They're more easily recruited as well. When you can keep your employees, your organization is going to have better morale. And then there's, as Michael was mentioning, a possible real estate cost savings as you sort of reimagine the spaces, make them more for collaboration and social hubs. And you may not need as many individual desks, maybe as we did back in the day. And then the biggest one of all, though, is just a huge cost savings from less turnover. That 35% less turnover for hybrid employees. So Michael, and David, you guys, I didn't prepare you for this one, but what is your guess as far as a percentage? So let's say you're replacing an employee. What, as a percentage of their salary, what do you think the percent is to replace an employee? Like 20, 30, 50, 100, 500?
It's a lot.
It's a
Yeah,
lot.
it's one of the biggest costs. I think it is the acquisition of employees and the retention of employees, and it could be upwards of over 100%. I think.
Yeah. So the first person I've asked actually got it right. It's 150% actually to replace an employee. And I never thought about it in these terms. That's from Gallup, by the way. But we always think about just getting the new person in and the time it takes for them to get up to speed. Think about all the people that have to interview this person. So you've got 5 candidates, you've got 6, 7 executives, let's say 7 executives that are all going to interview these candidates for 30 or 45 minutes. That's like 35 meetings with your top executives spending trying to figure out the right person. And that is lost time, that's lost productivity, that is a huge expense. So yeah, it's 150% on average to replace a person. And if they're a knowledge worker, it's 300 to 450%. So there's just a huge competitive advantage to retaining your own employees.
And you think about onboarding, right? So the onboarding process,
Yeah.
how many different people touch that employee during the onboarding process?
Oh my goodness, great point.
Start to multiply that out. It's a huge number. One other thing I'd like to address also real quick on this slide is the 8% increase in pay. And I think that is, it's important to understand that can come from many different areas, right? Not just the employer, but and that 8% can slide quite a bit depending on the person's own situation, right? Their the gas, how far away they live from home. All of those things go into that 8% increase in pay. If I'm working from home and I'm not having to drive, my employer doesn't pay for my gas to get to work, right? So those types of things are super important in figuring this whole thing out. So
you're right. Absolutely. So on average, it's an 8% increase in their minds, or equal to an 8% increase, I guess we should say. But for some people, that might be 20 or 30% if they're further out, right? So we keep using that phrase, what does hybrid done right? What does that actually look like? So it is organized, meaning you want to get people in on the same days, and that's either company-wide or that's team-wide. And ideally, you'd want to build, a framework that has some flexibility and choice within it, right? Um, you want the policies to be clearly communicated. You want the goals to be communicated. So, we had already kind of mentioned that, but days in office should be more about collaboration and connection and building culture. And, one of my teammates actually said that he goes in the office and he gets this energy that he then brings home with him for all the days he's home. And I thought that was, well stated. Um, and then exceptions should be rare. So, if you've got your team in on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and there's one person that never comes on Wednesdays, pretty soon people are going to start not coming on Wednesdays, right? So it should be rare. And then you want to match, you want it to be purposeful. So I can't remember if it was David or Michael that said that, but you need to give people a reason to come into the office. It's not, Monday through Friday, they're just going to be there like the older days. They're going to come in for meetings and for mentoring and for, those things in their calendar that make sense for them to be there. And they'll feel like their time traveling in is not wasted by doing that, by scheduling things in a way and giving them the technology and spaces they need to get their work done.
Hey, before you go ahead, Rob,
Mhm.
that picture is jumping out at me. So that's a neat picture, I'm assuming.
It is. That's a neat
It
center.
is. So
Yeah.
that's center. Okay. So I'm glad I'm actually going to bring this up now so that everybody can see this, right? So there's a lot about what Neat is doing that really excites me. One of the key features that Neat products have is called symmetry. Symmetry takes everybody in the room and puts them in their own Brady Bunch, or takes a couple of people and puts them in the Brady Bunch window. So imagine now talking to your conference room where you have 4 or 5 people sitting around the table, but in traditional video conferencing, what I see are 4 or 5 little ants in my meeting, right? And I want to see their faces in the same sense that you're all seeing us today in this sort of Brady Bunch fashion, right? So with symmetry, you can do that. Now, what's neat about that is that I get to see everybody now in a big picture in the Teams view or the Zoom view that we're all now used to seeing because of hybrid workplace, the whole 9 yards, right? And when I'm holding my sales meetings, I want to be able to see all the salespeople. They're all collected in 3 different locations, but now I get to see them in what, there's a couple of terms out there, inclusive participation or meeting equity, right? And I think that's really cool. The reason why I stopped here was I didn't realize you had this and it's jumping out at me. So center is an advancement to come towards already installed Neat projects. But what the really cool thing about center is that if all of my salespeople are sitting around the conference table and they're all actually collaborating as part of the meeting, they're going to be facing one another collaborating at the conference table. And now, even though they're still in my Brady Bunch view, right? What I've lost, though, is the ability to see them talking with me face to face. Center's going to bring that to reality, that all those people in the conference room are all now collaborating with one another again across the table, but they're actually focused towards me. So I could see them as though I was sitting at the conference table with them. So I was going to talk a lot about this in a future slide, but seeing this picture, I just couldn't resist to talk about it now.
I'm glad you did. I mean, so even the picture shows like a great example, like you were saying. So the person on the screen in the back is not in the meeting room. So in a normal situation, he'd be seeing the back of the heads of 2 people and the side of the heads of the other 2. So that Neat Center actually uses AI to detect, okay, well, where are they looking? Let's pick up this view, and it shows that person on the far end, everyone's faces looking forward. So kind of like you were saying, in the old days, the people that weren't in the office meeting room were sort of at a disadvantage. Now it's almost reverse. Like, so you want to give the people that are remote, that view of the people in the office that you were saying. Instead of like 5 popsicle sticks, you're seeing 5 faces, right?
That's correct.
Yep. It's really interesting that this is all born out of COVID, out of the work from home policies that were forced on everybody, as Michael said, right?
Mm-hmm.
That drove change with the manufacturers. That whole meeting equity name and label that came out of the fact that people that used to go into a conference room and be part of a meeting, and then you had somebody on the far end, now everybody's at home and they all see each other in equal squares. Well, once the restrictions were lifted and everybody was able to get back into work, the number one thing I hear from executives that we talk to is, I want to see everybody the way I used to see them when I was back at home now, because now they got to feel from that side. And
You
so
got it.
that really drove change, and it caused manufacturers that like Neat to say, wait a minute, we've got to address that issue because it's a very real issue now. It wasn't a real issue before 2019 because nobody knew any different.
Yep.
But once they got to experience that difference, they thought, gosh, how do we do this? And so Neat has come out with a fantastic solution to that problem.
Great. So I like this this quote from Satya Nadella of Microsoft. We need to stop thinking about remote work like a switch and think of it more like a dial. So it's not something you turn on and off. It's something that you slide up and down based on circumstances, market, your own company's, situation and circumstances, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where, with our organization, where meeting from where it makes sense came out of, right? Because where it makes sense doesn't mean that it's either on or off. It does mean more of a dial type of scenario.
Yeah.
It may make sense this week to do it one way and next week to do it a different way, depending on the circumstances.
And
But
based on teams.
set up to be set up no matter what, right?
Yep. And specific teams might need to be in the office more than others, based on the work they do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those work models really quick. So there's 3 different models. One is the fully flexible model. So there's 2 flavors of that. So that's when people are either fully remote, all employees are working remotely, or they have 100% choice. They can come into the office when they want. They can work from home when they want. They can work remotely when they want. It's completely up to them, fully flexible. So the other end of the spectrum really is fully in office, and not as many organizations are doing that these days, but you can see a few examples there. But that is when you're like the old days back at your desk, 100% of the time, Monday through Friday. And then there's organized hybrid. So the 3 flavors of that basically, and you can see examples at the top of companies that do this and the number of days that they're mandating in office. So like Apple's on this, I remember when they initially rolled theirs out, it was 3 days in office, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And I think they've changed it now to the middle days of the week. But the 3 flavors of organized hybrid are minimum days where you say, okay, everyone needs to be in the office 3 days a week. You choose the days. That's a little disorganized, and people are missing each other, and that's a little bit poor. Then there's specific days where you say, like we just gave the example for Apple. So you're in the office. Let's say everyone's going to be in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Everyone works from home Monday, Friday. And then the last one is a combo of the 2, which I kind of like. I kind of like that one best. But let's say maybe Tuesday, Thursday are your anchor days where people are in the office. Wednesday is more like a flex day. You can come in if you like. You can work from home if you like. And then Monday and Friday, you work from home. That gives you a little bit of choice within a structure, like we had sort of mentioned earlier. And yeah, any thoughts on that, you guys?
We have, as David was saying, we have the plan we call is work from where it makes sense. I think it makes sense to work at Starbucks all day, but I can't afford to do that for one. And I need to be with my folks. But nevertheless, we at Solutionz want to be sure that we have culture. And so there's at least an all hands day, 1 day a week. And then you can pick outside of that, right? So I think that's been super important for Solutionz, to be able to embrace a hybrid work program, but in order to maintain morale, a culture, camaraderie, and frankly, in for our business, there's a lot of training involved, from manufacturers coming and visiting us, lunch and learns, and that kind of stuff. So now we know when we're collecting all of our people for the right audience to where we actually have to have the training as well. So there's a big plus there.
Yeah,
very good point.
And one other thing, and speaking to some organizations, some of our customers and whatnot that have had to face these challenges, one of the issues that they always talk about or often talk about is that employee morale, and how we're allowing people to work from home, which is taking them away from a group setting where morale and all of that can expand and grow. how do we fix that? And what some of them have done is they've incorporated, like one of the middle days, they'll have like a softball team or something of that nature after work, where everybody then gets together and lets their hair down and has a good time, and really kind of team building and things of that nature. So they're looking for ways to incorporate more of that as they're removing days from the office, right? Kind of a trade-off.
I
I
wish
look
Neat had a
forward to the
softball
day where I
team.
can let my hair down. So yeah, that's a really good day.
Barely. I can barely let my hair down.
Okay, so there's an organization called Scoop, and they publish something called the Flex Index. So this is just a screenshot from the Flex Index to show which industries sort of are the most flexible, and you could kind of predict technology might be on top, right? Professional services, et cetera. So as you go down, they're sort of less and less flexible. And on the left here, this is talking about the models, meaning like how many days are most organizations mandating in office. You can see that 3 days and 2 days are by far the most popular. That comprises 87% right there, just the two. And the middle days of the week, predictably, are the days that most organizations are asking their employees to come in.
Yep.
So what are most organizations doing these days in the US? So most are actually going with hybrid. They're planning either team or company-wide hybrid. Most aren't planning major office downsizing, and the reason is because they do realize that the office does work best when everyone's there at the same time. So they're trying to get people there at the same time, like you were mentioning, Michael, the 1 day a week, everyone's there. And then if you ask workers, 80% of them say, I want my colleagues in on the same days that I'm in. Which is funny because there's another survey question that says, do you want full choice in your flexibility? And 75% said yes, but they also said 80% we want our colleagues to be in the same days as them. So you can't have both. It's like if you have kids, you understand like there's always this sort of sacrifice that comes in, and so the workers have to realize that as well. So then most organizations are sort of reimagining their workspaces, making them more social, making them more for collaboration, and then providing smaller spaces for people to do some quiet work that naturally still has to happen at times, or a meeting, in a privacy booth or that type of thing.
Yeah, I'll add that even Solutionz, we have to do this as well. We recently moved our Atlanta office. We'll move our Greenville office some later this year. As we move the Atlanta office, I wanted to try some new things. I wanted to make the space fun, real fun, find some fun things about it, right? One of the things we did in Atlanta is, what I found was in watching the employees come to work, the team members come to work before we actually moved spaces was, well, who was coming when, right? And so it would be not feasibly smart of me spending the company money to get an overly bloated space that isn't utilized correctly. So one of the things we're trying in Atlanta, which I know some corporations are trying with some great success, and that is hot desking. So we are hot desking in Atlanta. We have software that you reserve which desk you want. And so it gives you the ability of, and usually this concept is met with a lot of resistance, quite frankly, until people really begin to do it, right? And I'm going to talk about my friend here in a minute, but the idea being is that you can pick, whatever space you wanted to. Now you have to reserve that space, and you can set that reservation for daily, weekly, monthly, whatever. And when it expires, that space opens back up for reservation. So it's working out really well. I love the software. It's so easy to use. But this also gives you the ability of saying, I want the corner office tomorrow. I don't always want to be the office without the windows, right? So now with this hybrid workspace, with this ability to hot desk, I can actually maybe get the corner office once or twice a month. And that's really cool.
Great point.
Maybe I'm coming to the office with a team where I need that collaborative workspace, right? The quote living room, where we're all sitting in a living room setting with a big monitor on the wall that we can, cast our stuff up so that we can look at it together. That's huge, right? Let's pick the space that's going to be perfect for us. My friend John, back in the days of 2019, what I found was that I'm actually, I found that I can move from my office within my home to potentially the patio for a little while, to potentially the kitchen table. As I moved around the house, as I got sort of bored within the home, I would move around the house and I'd all of a sudden find my energy sort of come back at me again, right? Yeah, sometimes it had coffee to deal with it, but nevertheless, by just moving the space, by changing the
Your setting.
perspective that I'm living in, it actually changed a whole lot of things. Now, I bring up John for a reason. John's like, you're crazy. Like, John calls me crazy a lot, right? But John's employer went to this model. And John told me flat out, I'm going to hate this. And I'm like, do you remember you used to tell me I was crazy because I was moving around the office? I'm telling you, John, it's going to change your perspective about wanting to go to the office and how you use the office for your own productivity and the productivity between you and your coworkers and or you and your boss. So now there he is. He's in this organization, which I won't name, but the organization also provides lockers. And he thinks that's great because he lives in Chicago. So he's able to leave the good office shoes at the office and then get on the really terrible shoes that he's going to have to go slumping through the snow in, right? But he doesn't have to carry all this luggage with him. So I think it's just wonderful. In Atlanta, we do have lockers. We've provided lockers. You can lock your stuff up or just throw it in there, but I think it's a brand new, fresh concept that reinvents how to use the office space. And I would invite every corporation to think about it because it's a great way to downsize the space, but utilize the space and then give flexibility to the employees to use it in the way they and team members in the way that they actually see some good productivity elements out of that. So
It's so much about productivity is about energy. So you're re-energizing yourself by putting yourself in these new sort of more exciting spaces, like changing things up, right? David, you were going to say?
Yeah, one of the really interesting things that Michael, in speaking with Michael on the side about his office and the lockers, is one thing you told me that there are people that like having their pictures of their family on their desks and things of that nature, right? And that's important, or you get a drawing from your granddaughter or whatever the case may be, and you want to hang that up in your office, but these environments sometimes don't lend itself to that because you don't have the same office all the time. So what do you do? And people in his office, well, they keep that stuff in the locker, and when they go into whatever office they pick, they have a box and they put everything up so it feels homey, right, for the day or two that they're in there. So
yeah,
I think that's great. I think that's
a great
incredible
point.
Yep.
Okay, so what's out? What's out is 100% in office mandates are out. Individual assigned desks. So, a lot of these pictures on the right look like environments I worked in the first 20 years of my career, tall wall cubicles, that kind of thing. Executive offices, like in Mad Men, a big row of offices. It's funny, Michael, you had mentioned something about sitting by the window.
Yep.
LinkedIn recently updated all their offices. They put all the creative spaces on the outside by the windows because they said, why does someone need to have a window when they're sitting there doing their expense report or having a one-on-one conversation with someone, on Teams or Zoom in a pod? Like, that makes sense to me, right? You
Yep.
want to do your creative work and brainstorming, things like that. You might want a more creative environment. So,
yeah, I'll add that there's a customer, one of our big customers where we're doing a lot of refresh with them. All of their offices, they're now going to this kind of space that we're talking about, the different kind of environments, the living room setting, the lab setting, the this and the that. And you're right, some of their space along the windows are the living room office space, right? So it's not just the executives that get the window offices anymore, right? This particular company, I shouldn't name them, but this particular company, hot desking applies to everyone, including the CEO. He has chosen that he needed to be part of that as well because he felt that it was going to give him an opportunity to mingle in different areas of the building. And then it would allow him to actually mingle with like he could look to see who's reserved what and go, I haven't had a conversation with John for a long time. I'm going to book myself in that area closer to John. So I think it's an amazing opportunity that this person who runs this company said, it doesn't just apply to you, it applies to me. As I pointed out, we're moving our Greenville office later in the year, and we'll go to a full hot desking model in Greenville, and that will include me. I live in the Greenville-Spartanburg area. So of the brick and mortar that I'm most at, is the Greenville office. And I just think this is a great opportunity for the team to really embrace a new way of thinking, and for the team to understand as we go into your office space as customers and help you understand how to do some things better. We've now lived it, right? So
You got it.
that's the model that we're actually going to do in Greenville. So
That's great. And so you guys set up this slide perfectly, because we've already talked about sort of like neighborhoods. You had mentioned like the theme neighborhoods. That's for teams, or that's, you know, open spaces with different type of decorations to give you a different sort of energy.
Yep.
So, you know, what's in remote or hybrid work, you know, open spaces, neighborhoods, meeting rooms of various sizes, all this, privacy booths, hoteling and hot desking. You guys have already covered that completely. And then the one thing I wanted to mention, because everyone kind of forgets, the technology for home offices. So Forbes published an article, it was just in March, at the end of March, that said, you know, people are still struggling with their video and audio at home. A lot of people. And if they're relying on audio and video from their PC, I can understand why. So technology, kind of like our Neat frame, which is right, you know, next to that bullet point to the right, that allows people to join meetings at the push of a button. It gives them digital signage for their day's calendar just at a glance. I have mine sitting right here. I can see all my meetings for the day here and know, you know, what's coming up. So those type of things that just help. It takes bandwidth away from your PC, so those are good things as well. And we can do reserving and you know, hot desking right from the frame as well. Like I know you mentioned some software as well.
yeah.
Anything before I move on from this slide, you guys?
I think that last bullet point there, tech from home offices, I think we're seeing that evolve as well as we speak, right? And I really do feel that that number of 89% struggle with video and 85% struggle with audio, I do think that that is constantly going down. And the reason why is that, you know, as I mentioned before, the reason why I think it's going down is that you have your telco providers, your AT&Ts, companies like that are now offering a full gig right to your house, right? I mean, and we're starting to see that more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think the behavior of the industry is changing that as well, just like, you know, it changed with the meeting equity and things of that nature. So more and more people have access to better internet, and I think that's just a trend that's going to continue.
Agree.
Yep. Great point. So we won't spend much time on this, but this is a slide from our friends at Microsoft. So to be clear, Neat, our alliance partners are Microsoft and Zoom, and our devices work with Microsoft Teams meetings and Zoom meetings. So they put this slide together to sort of show an example of maybe some open space with some smaller meeting rooms, medium and larger sort of meeting spaces to address a lot of different types of work. And then I just wanted to show off because I think our devices are beautiful. When I first joined Neat, you know, I fiddled around with guitar a little bit. I looked at those Neat bars and I thought those look like a 60s Fender amp bezel. Like I just thought it was such a cool design. So I did want to just kind of show off here.
Yeah, I'll pause real quick on this one.
Oh.
And that is that, you know, if you liked this webinar and you're picking up some nuggets about it, we're going to host some future webinars, Solutionz Neat, whereby we're going to be demonstrating symmetry live and the benefits of that. What does that look like, and as well as center as well. So if you like this, subscribe or just send us an email or direct message me if you'd like. But we'll make sure that we include you on this. As I pointed out a little bit earlier, Center is an advancement that's coming for Neat products. So all of that product that you see there, with the exception of Frame, Center is going to be able to upgrade. If you install today, Center will upgrade that piece will be an upgrade piece to changing the dynamics of the room even more so. So I like the engineering mindset. And one of the best ways to experience audio conferencing, video conferencing, is us presenting to you in this sort of format, right? So you can hear the product, how well the product sounds, et cetera, et cetera. So thanks, Rob.
Great point. Great point. Okay, so we're getting in the home stretch here. So these are some of the experts whose work and statistics that we've been presenting. So they've made some important statements here. Nick Bloom, I want to call him out just because he's uniquely qualified, I think, and he has no bias, obviously, right? Like Michael, David, and I, we would probably love it if everybody went back to the office 5 days a week, just from a business standpoint and selling our technology. But we realize that's not the best thing. But Nick has no bias. But what he basically says is that organized hybrid is best, and he studied management practices. His focuses are management practices, productivity, uncertainty, and remote work. Those are his four. So I think more than anybody, he's probably qualified to sort of talk about these things. And we've cited his work mostly throughout this presentation. And then this is kind of just a summary of things that we went over. So just to summarize, hybrid, when you do it right, you've got happier employees, your company morale is better. It's easier to recruit and retain your workers, and that gives you a huge advantage. You're creating a culture of care, equity, and belonging. You're better focused on DEI, like we mentioned that as well. You're more mindful of your employees' mental and physical wellness. I mentioned physical wellness because, symmetry and our auto framing technology does allow people to sort of move about the room. You can stretch, you can stand up, you can sit back down, and you'll remain on camera. The AI camera will follow you. And it gives you greater agility and resilience in volatile markets. So if something ever happened again and we're all working from home for a month, you've got that foot in the door, right, if you're doing this. There's the possible reduction in real estate footprint. And then just going back to hybrid workers being 5% more productive, meaning your company is 5% more profitable. And when you add all that up, it just shows that doing hybrid right actually is a huge profit center and a huge competitive advantage, especially over organizations that aren't doing it right.
Absolutely. As you throw
Anything?
that up, as you not throw up, but as you put up that slide, one of the things that we're starting to see as an organization, our Solutionz is a technology provider, not just AV, but infrastructure and a lot of other things. The conversations that we're now being part of, where our typical customer within the organization was always facilities or IT mainly, right? Those are the people who take care of the technology, or those are the people who have to facilitate our access to communications within the organizations. We're starting to see human resources come to the table.
No doubt.
And the reason for that is, how do we build space which is going to actually invite people to collaborate or invite people to come to work here and there? So a lot of our sales approaches now has turned more towards a thought leadership approach. Hey, let's roll up our sleeves. Let's whiteboard. Let's brainstorm what success ultimately looks like for your organization. And how do you take care of it? How do you train people to use that? All of those topics are now extremely important topics, and we've had not one, but 20, but 100, but thousands of those kinds of conversations, and we certainly invite especially human resources, because we now know that human resources has a lot more of a say, a lot more of a drive in what the future of office space is going to look like. So that's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. And I think from my perspective in closing, I think that it, again, a great topic to discuss. This is a topic that not one size fits everybody. One thing that we saw with the pandemic is a lot of organizations, healthcare, education, corporate, got caught flat-footed. Nobody expected to have to shift on the dime and work from home. The calls we were getting were unbelievable. The volume, right? How do we do this? How do we do this the right way? This is something that every organization will have to face it. If you haven't faced it yet, you're going to face it. I think hybrid is here to stay. And so, doing it right is important. So I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you and with everybody, and just to kind of share some thoughts on how we did it and what we saw from it. There again, it's not a one size fits all. It's what makes sense for your organization.
Agreed.
Yep. Wow, right on time. 1 hour.
Excellent. Do you want to bring us home?
I would just say that, keep following us, follow Solutionz, follow Neat on social, because we'll be doing updates to this information. 9 months ago, this information was completely different. We're talking about quiet quitting and the Great Resignation, and things have changed so much that if you attend this same webinar 6 months from now, it will be different. So just thank you for having me, you guys.
You bet. Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you,
was.
everybody, for joining us. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.